They, Jesus and the apostles, they went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus entered the synagogue and taught. They were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Just then there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit. He cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent, come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. They were all amazed, and they kept on asking one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." At once his fame began to spread throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. It's Oscar season. People are talking about movies. And from time to time, you'll see a list of what many people think are the best movies of all time. Somewhere towards the top of that list will always appear The Godfather. You know the story of the Corleone family, the family involved in organized crime. They call it the family business. Don Corleone, the head of the family, does not want middle son Michael to be part of the family business. He wants him to be clean. He wants him to grow up and become a judge or a politician or someone who will set the family high in the social standing. So Don doesn't want Michael to be part of the family business. The oldest and youngest sons do not want Michael to be part of the family business, and Michael does not want to be part of the family business. But then the Don is shot, and someone has to enact revenge. Michael gets drawn in, and Michael's bride inadvertently gets ambushed, and his brother Sonny gets ambushed, and one thing leads to another, and it just seems to everybody in the family that there is only one logical choice. So Michael says he will do it, but only for a year or two, 5 tops. It's an interconnected system of relationships and beliefs, a system of how they relate to one another and what they do together. The system doesn't stop, and organized crime becomes his life's work, and the system ends up destroying him. Now, the Godfather movie I lift up because I think it is an artistic rendering of systems theory, the type of thing that people talk about in businesses and organizations and families and religious institutions. Systems theory recognizes that we are not human beings alone. We are inherently part of larger systems. It's like magnets being drawn or repulsed from one another by opposite poles. Or you can think of it in terms of the Earth in relationship to the moon and the sun. They have this orbit in this planetary system. The system is all tied together, this invisible influence that nevertheless is real. We may not live in Don Corleone's family, but we live in systems of magnetic influence: family, friends, clubs, businesses, political parties, country. Now, these things can be good, or they can be drawn into the dynamics of evil. And so we hear this morning this story from the Gospel of Mark about an unclean spirit. And I would invite you to turn to consider that story in terms of systems theory. Because Jesus enters the system of this synagogue, and notice the power of Jesus in his teaching comes out in the synagogue. So the synagogue itself is not a bad thing, but there is something that is present that has a pull. Did you notice what the man said? What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? He's not speaking for himself. He's part of a larger system. The context of Jesus' teaching is this, that when Jesus speaks, the spirits shriek, "What have you to do with us?" The words of Jesus upset the system. They throw off the pull. They change the charge. They change the culture. And when the system is broken, then the people are free to reform into a new way of life. Don't you wonder what Jesus was teaching about? We are not told what he said. And when we're not told, I think that is an invitation for us to wonder and to use our faithful imagination. Was he talking to them about human dignity? Was he talking about forgiveness, reconciliation, sacrifice, love, community? We're not told. We just know the unclean spirit shrieks out loud and says, "What have you to do with us?" And so that's an invitation for us to say, what does Jesus have to do with us today? And what's the unclean spirit that seems to be shrieking? We've heard in the last months of a Hollywood producer who wants to abuse some women. So he has his assistant make the arrangements. He has his friends make the contact. He has his lawyers pay the abused woman hush money. He threatens to blackball the actress to tell his friends not to hire her. His friends have some idea of what's going on, but they don't want to make him mad because he has so much power, and so they go along. Do you see? It's all part of a system. It's not just one person. It's part of a system that allows this to go on. And then we hear this week the horrible story of a doctor responsible for caring for female Olympic athletes, and he abuses the girls, and it goes on for decades. It comes out in court this week where 160 women testify against what he has done to them. And now, after months of asking for it, there will be a systemic investigation at Michigan State University where the doctor worked, because someone else had to know. And how did this go on? I tell these stories just because they're in the news. But we all know this is not about just Hollywood actresses and Olympic stars. These violent acts are perpetuated every day, regardless of socioeconomic status, race, religion, sexual orientation, or marital status. Statistics have been around for a long time that have said around 25% of women have experienced something like this. But friends, the statistics are unreliable because all too often these manipulations and crimes go unreported. This is a system issue. It is an unclean spirit, and it pervades our culture. And it is clear that Jesus is calling us to cast out this unclean spirit. The first thing we need to do is to get it out on the table. And I'm grateful for a church like Westminster where we can talk about difficult things, because Christ has called us to talk about difficult things. We know that these kind of things can happen anywhere, and we need to talk about it openly. To ignore it is to allow these systemic abuses to continue. I want you to know I did not write this sermon alone. I asked for the input of over a dozen women who have helped to open my eyes to see not just the breadth of this problem, but how it can leave long-lasting, even permanent damage behind. I want to thank all of them for their candor and their courage to speak openly with me about this. And I realize we can't say it all in one sermon, but what we can do is get it out on the table and open our eyes and our mouths about this. These kind of abuses are not perpetuated by all men, but Christians believe in sin, and we believe in self-examination, and we believe in the examination of the systems in which we find ourselves, because sometimes knowingly or unknowingly we may perpetuate that system. So if we want to stop it, we have to talk about it, and we have to all take a deep look in our own lives and our own practices. Even if one man is acting by himself in one of these situations, it's within a system where in his mind he justifies what he's doing. Even if a man knows it's wrong, in his position of power, he feels superior to the person he's violated. It's what he justifies, in part by what he learns from the way that men talk around him, often reinforced by pornography. There's a way of justifying what he's doing that's part of that system, that culture. What the Bible says in the story today, where the Spirit shrieks and says, "What have you to do with us?" And so these things have to stop. We have a Christian moral duty to be part of making that system stop. That's what Jesus does. He stops the demonic system from perpetuating. And now what does Jesus call us to do, and what does it look like? Very clearly, we have to denounce the violent acts, to name them for what they are, and to confront the abusers and this abusive type of action. It is something that is new for us to hear this many women speak up and have their voices heard. It is hard to speak in this way. Women are empowering other women, and that is what needs to happen. The women need to empower other women, and the men need to learn to listen, and to listen again, and to listen better, to learn, and then, finally, to speak up. We have to start training our children from the earliest ages, to train them and ourselves to value themselves and all people around them, to talk clearly about boundaries. And if a child doesn't want to hug someone, don't make them hug them, because they need to feel in control of their own body. They need to feel safe, and they need to feel from the earliest ages that they have the right to say no. Women have a moral obligation to see what's going on and to empower one another to speak up. It's particularly difficult to the abused to do this because they have been shamed or frightened by their abuser. And the society has not been supportive enough of these survivors. The perpetuator shames them into not speaking up, and then the rest of society communicates things such as, "Well, just forget about it. That was a long time ago," or "Can't you just get over it?" Friends, these kinds of words can traumatize someone even further, because their body has been invaded and their personal sense of safety has been violated. You know, we recognize when a soldier comes home from war that post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is real, that they have experienced something so violent that it stays there under the surface, and years or even decades later, something triggers a memory, and all of a sudden it explodes back into a consciousness. Well, the same thing happens to women who are abused. They can't control this reaction, but that landmine experience happens, and all of a sudden the trigger comes, and they feel like they're back there again. They may be able to heal from this, but it takes support, and it takes our understanding to help them along the way. Men have a moral obligation to listen to what women are saying about this and to help this cultural shift keep on moving. It is long overdue. Men need to learn to pay attention, to hear and see how we are part of the system. Experiences of rape, molestation, and intimidation are terrifying, and they are far more extensive than what has been known and what the public has admitted. Molestation and rape are not just about love or affection. They are not about love or affection. They are about power. A power differential is what makes it unjust, unfair, intimidating, degrading, and dehumanizing. It's about someone being made to do what they do not want, and the feeling of being used takes away someone's sense of dignity and someone's sense of being and humanity. It turns women into objects and it denies their personhood. It denies their being created in the image of God, which is the starting place for us in the Bible, that all God's children are created in God's image. This kind of abuse is confusing. Sexuality is given to us by the Creator to be good. Sexuality is for the bonding of two people in love together. It's not just about passion, it's about creating a mutual sense of caring and safety. But when sexuality is misused, it ends up making the violated one feeling horribly confused on a deep psychological level. So they end up having ambivalent feelings about sexuality. Those feelings unpredictably reemerge later in life, and that past violation comes back to haunt them. And therefore the past significantly diminishes the present. Friends, this will take a long-term commitment for us to change and to cast out this unclean spirit. I believe Jesus can help us to transform. That's the heart of what reconciliation is about, transformation. But we have to take Jesus seriously in the whole of the Bible and see how these things can be cast out. The Bible gives us hope and a sense of empowerment and change as we pay attention to the dynamics in our lives and how we treat one another as neighbors in the world. There are issues of ethics involved here, language and habits and patterns and rituals and values and social structures. I just want to lift up a couple of those today about language. How we speak about women has to change. Words have power. They shape our imagination. And so there have to be words that we just absolutely agree that we will not use, and if we hear them, we will confront them. Because we do not want anyone's mind shaped in these negative directions. The words, the phrases, the ideas that demean or diminish the worth and dignity of women. We need to pay attention to our language because words do shape our consciousness. Sometimes you'll hear someone say, well, I'm tired of being politically correct. I just want to say that's that unclean spirit pushing against them and trying to draw them back into the orbit of that unclean way of being. I think what we need to do is say words have power, and words can do a great deal of good or they can be devastating. We focus on language because language is one way that every one of us here can do something to help rechange this system, to cast out this unclean spirit. To change our language is to change what we see and perceive, and it is crucial in this regard. Our language also has to be for healing. And so we need to listen. If someone is opening up to us to talk about this, we need to listen and listen and listen again. The women who have been shamed by their abuser have been told not to talk about it, and part of what we want to do is open ourselves up to be able to do that. And to those who have been abused, we want to say in absolutely clear terms, it was not your fault. It was not your fault. Social structures are another way that we can think about this. Society has changed enough that women are very clearly have said for decades and beyond they don't want to be cloistered or placed behind walls for the men to keep them safe. They want to be treated as equally valued members of society and recognized for their unique talents and skills. Women need to be in positions of power and authority in order to change this system. The glass ceilings need to be broken. In terms of equal pay for equal work, that needs to be something that is a top priority because otherwise the system fails and the system perpetuates what has been. People in positions of power need to recognize the power that they have and not have that give them a sense of entitlement, but a higher sense that they have boundaries that they must keep. Personhood is about self-control. And we need to help people, all people, feel that sense of dignity. We need to teach our daughters to speak up and say things such as, "No, that's not appropriate. Don't touch me." And where someone won't listen, we need to put systems in place where they know that they will have others who will stand up with them and say to these people who cross boundaries, "No more." What is absolutely clear is bodies are sacred, and we need to have respect for boundaries that are there. There's lots of things that we can do along the way. We will learn and grow as we are open to hearing and coming to understand things that we can do. We need to be able to talk about those things with one another, to advocate for those things as we hear and learn together. There are some women in the church now who are talking about putting together a group for survivors. And they want to create a safe haven for women where they can talk about these things and be heard and cared for. If you're interested in doing that, let me know. I will pass your name along. It's one step. We need to find other steps because we're following in the footsteps of Jesus, who says to the apostles when he sends them out that he has given them power, and they come back. They come back after they've been sent out to all these small towns and villages, and they come back to Jesus and they say, "We were even able to cast out demons and heal people." That's what we've been empowered to do. That's what we need to do, to be part of Christ's ministry of reconciliation, which is a ministry of transformation, because the world needs to change, and we want to be part of it. We want to do this in ways that do not fracture lives or destroy careers unnecessarily, because then that just sets up a counter-reaction in the system. But make no mistake, we want to be part of that transformation. And to say to the women in pain, "We hear you. We hear you. Help us to come together to hear better, to know better what we can do. And in the name of Jesus Christ, to toss out this demonic, unclean spirit in our culture so that we can all live together in peace, shalom, grace, and goodness as God intends for all God's people." Amen.